Public testimony is a key part of the legislative process. How else would lawmakers know how the people they serve feel about a possible new rule? Have an opinion? All you had to do is show up, sign up, and speak up. But now, one committee chairman says if you aren't old enough to vote, you're not old enough to testify. Falsely reporting child abuse or neglect doesn't come with too many consequences here in Idaho, at least for now. Another new bill would put some teeth in the current law about filing false claims. But is it necessary? And any state agency showing up at a non-governmental event could soon be a thing of the past. Sponsorships and donations are being questioned and possibly disallowed. Still, the early days of the 2023 legislative session and kicking off State House committees can be a mundane process. We talked about this already with them just kind of going around the room, introducing themselves, and then calling it a day. Often, though, the committee chair uses the first meeting to explain some ground rules. The rules are whatever that committee chair says they are, meaning different committees can have different rules.
But sometimes they take pictures while people are testifying and things. That's my call. So if there are people who are uncomfortable with that, we can put a stop to it.
Before we'll hear it, the agency is going to have to already have secured a representative as a sponsor.
Unique to this committee is that we will not take testimony from anyone under the age of 18 years of age, except by invitation of the chair. So maybe it's the class president or something of a high school. And there's reasons for that, and you can ask me about that at a later time.
So those are examples of some of them. And did you catch that last one? That one kind of sticks out, doesn't it? Mainly because no other committee is choosing to limit testimony from minors. That's Republican Representative Bruce Skog from Nampa, and that's how he opened the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee on Tuesday. He said then, ask me at a later time and I'll explain. Well, it's later, and Andrew Bartline asked him to explain.
Before a bill makes it to the House or Senate floor, it must first pass committee, run by its respective committee chair.
I guess they call me chairman now.
In this case, that's Republican Representative Bruce Skog.
My job as a committee chair is to maintain decorum and get everyone heard in the committee. And I have to give preference to the adults. I think that's only fair to our voters.
Why do you have to give preference to adults? Why is that fair to voters?
Because they are the voters and usually the larger part of the taxpayers.
Skog chairs the Judiciary Rules and Administration Committee. And under House Rule 26, quote, any person may attend any meeting of any standing or select or special committee, but may participate in said committee only with the approval of the committee itself.
I'm not aware of any other committees in the House that have this same rule. And so I'm kind of the tip of the spear to see how this will work out.
The decision quickly garnered a sharp response among politically active young people.
It's definitely something of great concern to me and a lot of my friends.
Simon Richardson is 17 years old.
I mean, even though I'm not an adult yet, I feel like getting involved is really my entire future. I mean, everything that is decided now impacts my life, my parents' life, my future kids' life. And as someone who works and pays taxes and is old enough to maturely go in and testify, I feel like my voice should be heard too.
But Representative Skog says the backlash hasn't been mature at all.
And I haven't heard from, that I know of, any adult on this issue, but only a handful of minor children who have called him in very disrespectful. One phone call I had here just yesterday, so, well, you want to talk about this or do you just want to yell at me? They just wanted to yell at me. This is not an absolute ban on children from testifying in committee. There will be times when it's appropriate.
What is an example of that? What would be an appropriate situation?
20 kids show up under the age of 18 and they're passionate about an issue and they really want to be heard, and that'll probably happen. And I'll say, well, pick a spokesperson. We'll bring them up here. And they can contact me beforehand and we'll set that up.
Does that seem like a fair compromise to you?
I don't think it is. There aren't actual classes going to the legislature. There's no official, school classes. It's all just students who care about the issue and should have their voices heard. And, to really demonstrate how many people care, it's important to have everyone there and have everyone testify. One person can't represent everyone.
Their voices can still be heard.
If there's time for children and we can work it out, fine.
But in Skog's committee, it's just not a priority.
For him to limit people under 18, it just makes me wonder who will be limited next.
Are you married to this idea going forward, or is this maybe a play it by ear? Do you think things could change?
I can always change my mind if there's good information that tells me I should change it.
Simon tells me he's spoken with lawmakers last legislative session, or spoke with lawmakers last legislative session, specifically two representatives in the State Affairs Committee. The topic regarded gun safety. That was not official testimony on a bill, but rather lawmakers making time for their constituents, and in this case, that situation would be students. So this would not entirely isolate people under 18 from participating in state politics, getting their voices heard, but it does limit them in one committee at the State House.
Okay, so I guess the question would be, like, if it's about the students and there's a group of them and he says pick a spokesperson, does that apply to, say, other groups who all feel the same way but have all signed up to testify, just to kind of in the essence of conserving time in committee hearings?
From what I understood in my conversation with Representative Skog today, your voters, if there are 10 voters that all have the same opinion, he's willing to hear all 10 of them, even if there's significant overlap. But if there's, 20 high school students per se, it's going to be a spokesperson situation.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
What we're trying to do away with here is false reporting for CPS or turning into the state child abuse when it's not a case. There's a ton of incidents that are turned in that are really false claims. Right now, there's just not a good punishment for that.
Republican Representative Heather Scott was the co-presenter of legislation that hopes to put more teeth in Idaho's law that punishes people for reporting cases of abuse or neglect to Child Protective Services. Right now, it's just a civil punishment, monetary, $2,500 or actual damages and attorney fees, whichever is more. Representative Scott wants to add a $1,000 fine to that, or 3 months in jail, or both. And as you heard, she claims there needs to be stiffer punishment because there's a ton of incidents, as she says, that are turned in that are really false claims. And we wanted to know if this was true. And according to Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, where Child and Family Services lives, they had 23,131 calls of child abuse, neglect, or abandonment last year. Okay, so when they get a call, a social worker will take information from a reporting party, like what happened, who was involved. They want details. That social worker will then talk to their supervisor to see if this call is worth turning into a screened-in one, that is, a screened-in report or not, something they will look into further possibly. And they base that decision on certain criteria, like how definitive is this report? Have we heard something about this before? Does it meet the definition of what they usually respond? And if it does, well, they require a respond. They are required to respond within 72 hours. Some of those responses are immediate, like if a child is in imminent danger, in which case they respond with police. And in fact, most responses are done with police since most calls are about criminal child abuse. And 23,000 referrals, that is a decent amount, as you can imagine. And of those, 9,303 were assigned for safety assessment, meaning 40% of their calls that came in, they sounded legitimate enough, and they sent somebody out to see what was going on. And of those 23,000 calls, only about 1,200 led to a child being brought into care. Now, that doesn't mean the others weren't legitimate. It just means sometimes a relative helps out, and they can kind of move in and make sure that child remains safe. They're not out there to take kids away from families. They're just to make sure that kids are safe and cared for. So does that mean there's a ton of incidents turned in that are really false claims, as Representative Scott said, and then repeated by co-presenter Republican Senator Scott Herndon? We asked the administrator of DHW's Family and Community Services.
There are just under 24,000 reports to CPS every year in the state of Idaho. After investigation by CPS usually finds over 80% of those to be unsubstantiated.
That's correct. The majority of referrals that come into us don't end up being substantiated.
When you say unsubstantiated, some people go, oh, false reports. You're saying those aren't the same thing?
No, they're not. The unsubstantiated just means that that we didn't find abuse and neglect or abandonment. It doesn't mean that people are reporting with bad faith.
What about false reports, like intentional false reports? Is that a problem?
It can be, and we don't keep track of false reports because what we do is we go out and we see if the child's in danger or not. We don't go out and see if the person was meaning to give a false report. We're focused on the safety of the child, not really on proving the motive of the person who made the report.
Gilliland did say there have been cases where divorcing parents may call in claiming abuse on each other. And he said it can get to the point where it's clear it's not in good faith. And Usually, lawyers or the police will tell them to just knock it off. That's what they say. So in order for there to be punishment handed down, as described in Idaho's reporting in bad faith law, the $2,500 or the damages plus attorney's fees, well, somebody would have to take them to court in order for that to happen. So how often does that happen?
And we actually don't have any knowledge of anybody actually carrying forward with that.
So as far as you know, with this statute of reporting in bad faith, you don't know of any cases that has?
So I've asked the social workers, and I've asked our attorneys if they know of any of them, and they have said they haven't encountered any of them that have actually happened. Now that doesn't mean that they don't, because we're not keeping track of. That's a court issue, not a health and welfare issue.
And apparently, not too many other people are keeping track. We asked the court. Well, we actually asked the Ada County prosecutor if there have been any cases in the last year where someone was sued for civil damages under Idaho's bad faith reporting law. They also said they don't track that stat. So we don't know whether false reporting of child abuse or neglect is an actual problem in Idaho in need of stiffer penalties, which makes one wonder why this bill is being considered. What we do know is there are children out there that who are being abused, abandoned, and neglected. And Idaho does have a mandatory reporting law, which says any physician, any resident on a hospital staff, an intern, a nurse, a coroner, a school teacher, daycare personnel, social worker, any other person having a reason to believe a child has been abused, abandoned, or neglected, or who sees that child in a situation which could result in any of those outcomes, you must report that within 24 hours and not worry about whether your report will be proven unsubstantiated.
It is better to report and probably maybe be wrong and have that child protected than to try to do an investigation yourself or not report at all.
To make a report, you can call 211 or the numbers that appear on your screen right now. In the Treasure Valley, it's 208-334-KIDS, 5437. Or statewide, it is toll-free, 855-552-KIDS. All right, let's jump over to the House State Affairs Committee, where the backlash from what happened in Boise last September continues. This morning, Republican Representative Jason Monks from Meridian proposed a bill that would prevent state agencies from donating or sponsoring a non-governmental event without the approval of the governor's office. What kind of non-governmental events are we talking about?
So I've even heard of donations and sponsorships at things that I like, maybe a rodeo, but I don't know why the government should be spending taxpayer money to sponsor a rodeo. There might be a pride event that would be here. Nothing against having a pride event. It's part of the American process that we have, but I don't think that's the government's responsibility to sponsor that organization or an event like that. But no different than sponsoring a rodeo, I think, in my opinion, or a church activity that happened to be out there. It's just not the appropriate role of the government to sponsor those things.
Okay, so he threw rodeo out there like as an example, and we looked around. We didn't see any Idaho agency named as a sponsor of any rodeo in Idaho. Not the Snake River Stampede, not the Caldwell Night Rodeo, not the Eagle Rodeo, not even the Riggins Rodeo. When asked why he was bringing forth this bill, Representative Monk said he was trying to address a specific problem. That problem, as you may remember and you probably can figure out, was the hubbub created during last fall's Boise Pride event. There were plans of a kids' drag show, and suddenly sponsors began sliding back their support of the whole event under pressure from certain right-wing groups. So when some pointed out Idaho's Department of Health and Welfare had a booth at the event, well, some others decided that was a bridge too far. Health and Welfare subsequently withdrew its orange-level sponsorship from Boise Pride and pulled its booth from the park for the weekend. DHW Director Dave Jepson was asked about this directly during today's Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, that meeting about seeing money in their budget being spent on events like Boise Pride.
The primary reason that we, for example, sponsor or have the booth at a Pride event is primarily through our tobacco cessation program. And there are a number of events where we go to be present to provide services for tobacco cessation. Sometimes that's at a rodeo, sometimes that's at a drag strip where racing is taking place, or a race track. Sometimes it's at the Boise Hawks baseball game, and sometimes it's at an LGBT Pride event. We don't go to those events to endorse a rodeo or to endorse a race or to endorse a Pride event. We're there really to serve those that are in need of cessation services and to make those services available for folks.
and sometimes just to promote public health. And when asked about how many other sponsorships might be affected by this bill, Representative Monk said he didn't have any specific numbers. But House Bill 12 was moved forward unanimously and will get a full hearing in an upcoming State Affairs Committee meeting. All right, reminder, we are not just here on your television starting at 4:58:35. We're all over your social networks as well, so you can connect with us at any time, even after hours. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, pretty much everywhere. Feel free to send us an email or leave us a voicemail too, because you know how much we love those. And if you do miss any of our 208 shows, you can watch them all. They're available on KTVB, our YouTube page. You know, there's a peak, there's a park, and there's a pool named after Borah. High school and a post office as well in Boise bear his name. The man, the lion, after which these locations are dubbed, is Senator William Edgar Borah, the legendary Idaho politician. He was known in the U.S. Senate as the Lion of Idaho for being outspoken on issues he felt strongly about. Borah began his career in Idaho politics in 1892, just after we became a state, for then Governor William McConnell, and he was elected to the Senate in 1907. According to the United States Senate Archives, he was once named by Time magazine as the most famed senator of the century, and he spent some time on the cover of some of those national magazines as well. Borah spent 33 years in the U.S. Senate advocating for peace and outright ending of the war between the two, I guess, World War after World War I, I should say. He wasn't necessarily an advocate for all Americans, though. Be remiss not point out he wrote a letter to one of the founders of the NAACP back in 1926 saying he wasn't a fan of the 15th Amendment, the one that gave black people the right to vote. Senator Borah passed away at the age of 74 on this day, January 19th, 1940, from a brain hemorrhage. In 2021, you're looking at it now. A statue was erected in Borah's likeness in front of the post office that bears his name in downtown Boise. Interestingly, the stone that Borah's statue is standing upon, that same stone found at the top of Mount Borah, which happens to be Idaho's tallest peak.
That was a different day today when you started with a couple of inches, 3 inches, maybe some spots around the valley with 4 inches of snow, and then the sunshine for this afternoon. But weather changes quickly in Idaho. And here's another quick change. 36 degrees was the high today, and 39 is the average. I'm pointing that out because we have not had, the past several days, our temperatures have been well above average, as you know. But now we're falling below average, and that's going to be the case here through the weekend and even into next week. Here's the amount of rain that was received at a 0.23, so we're about 0.65. We are below because we really haven't had precipitation since the 22nd of December, in the way of snow, I should say. So when we look at this getting into this month, this is the first snowstorm of the year, as you know, and it's been almost a month since we saw one. Tomorrow, no snow. All of this storm has moved to the east, and you notice the temperatures are basically just above freezing for the high. This is interesting. Here's your wind chills during the day tomorrow. Each graph indicating from 5 o'clock in the morning to at 8 o'clock in the morning, 12 degrees your wind chill. So many of you going to work or to school, you're going to see that's going to be very, very cold. Not really warming up in the wind chill for the afternoon, as wind chills will be into the mid-20s. One other thing that I want to point out here, we've got the clear skies. It's cold for tonight. This is the Futurecast. But then as we get into Saturday night, there's one area here in the way of a storm system right here. This is for Boise, and as you can see, that's 11 o'clock. Could be, at this point, we're a little early on this, an inch maybe of snow with this storm, but watch for that Saturday night and early Sunday morning. That's going to be Saturday night here as you look at the temperatures, and these temperatures hold. Lows down into the teens. You can see Monday morning's a chilly morning. Of course, every morning will be for the next several days, and highs basically in the 30s.
Meaning that snow is going to stick around. A few months back, the city of Nampa held a contest to name its city plows. Elementary kids chose some pretty creative names, you know, like Plowy McPlowface, that's always a classic, and Lightning McLean. And despite the sunshine this afternoon, this morning, we got to see some of those plows in action, at least one. Here's Darth Blader going down the street, clearing snow around Nampa early this morning. Darth Blader. But the explanation of how a snowplow actually clears the roads is what caught our attention. It might answer some of the questions you might have when it comes to how they get that stuff off the road. According to Nampa, the snowplow blades cannot get to that bare surface of the roads. They just kind of float across the top, you know, just kind of get that stuff off the top, moving a majority of the snow. The salt, then they drop behind them, well, that helps remove the remaining snow. Thanks for that explanation, Nampa. A lot of you fired up today during the show. Let's get to some of those messages. Hope we can get to as many as we can here. This one from John. Why are the Republicans limiting the age for citizens to have a say? If they're comfortable having 17-year-old men and women protect the country and the military, those same defenders should be able to voice opinions politically. What are they afraid of? Truth, asks John. This one here seems like some of our members of the legislation do not realize these young people under 18 will soon be voters, says Scott. Young deciders become, yes, young voters, older voters. Representative Skog shouldn't be surprised at kids yelling at him. They're just modeling the behavior of adults like those at the Caldwell School District. Touche. Good point. We've seen that too many times over the last year or so. 2 years, probably. But if only adults can testify, how will 11-year-old girls be able to testify while bearing their loaded AR-15s in a committee hearing, says Paul. Asks Paul. That actually happened a couple of years ago. Paul remembers that. Maybe you do, too. Surely Heather Scott can find something more useful to do than discouraging folks from reporting possible child abuse. Who is she trying to protect, asks Jack in Boise. Does the name Baby Cyrus ring a bell? And we talked to the Department of Health and Welfare. They don't think it's going to discourage people from reporting. They don't feel like that's going to be a problem in this case. So if that alleviates some of those fears. Does it seem reasonable that if we have a law that punishes false reports, we'll have people possibly avoiding reporting a possible case out of fear? That's the question I was trying to get to. No, I asked him that question, and he said, no, I don't think that's going to be a problem. But again, we'll see what happens with this bill as it makes its way through the State House. We'll see you back here tomorrow.